Hey everyone, Steven here with Lucky Casts, and today we're going to look at how to add StimulusJS to your Lucky applications. StimulusJS allows you to add little JavaScript sprinkles to your application. You define a controller in JavaScript, then utilize that controller by adding simple additional markup to data attributes in your Lucky page. I find that realistically it gets me 99% of what I need in the majority of my applications. Certainly, that's not the case if you're building something like a front-end heavy application, a graphics editor, or something like that. It may not be your best bet over something like Vue or React in that case, but that doesn't mean that it won't work great alongside those for some of the more simple functionality. So to get started, let's take a look at the example on the Stimulus homepage. This is at stimulus.hotwire.dev, and then we'll jump into installing Stimulus in your Lucky apps. Stimulus is really made up of three core components. First, you have the controller, which is where all of your JavaScript functionality lives. It's just a plain JavaScript class that extends from a Stimulus controller. Next, you have targets. In this case, we have two. We have a name target on this text input, and we have an output target on this span. You define those here in the controller in this static targets declaration with name and output, and then you can access them with this.nameTarget and this.outputTarget. Pretty simple. Finally, and in this case what ties the whole controller together, are actions. In this case, when I click this button, I want the hello controller to run its greet function. In this case, the greet function takes the output target and sets the text content to hello and then the input target's value. What you end up with is the ability for a user to type in their name, like here I can put in Lucky Casts, click this button, and then get some immediate feedback with the output saying, hello, Lucky Casts. What you end up with is code that's very easy to reason about and reuse, and it's really easy to modify and extend with almost no changes to your JavaScript. For example, let's say that we wanted to have this greeting displayed as a user typed instead of whenever the user clicks greet. We actually don't have to have access to the JavaScript file at all. We can inspect this element, jump over to the input, and add another data action. So we can say data action, let's say that whenever we get an input on this field, we want the hello controller to run the greet function again. Exact same function, just using a different event on a different element. Now, if I start typing again, you can see that it updates live without having to click the greet button. And this is not even our website. We don't have access to this JavaScript. We're just modifying the HTML markup to use a function that already exists. So now that we have a good understanding of what StimulusJS is good for, let's look at installing it in your Lucky app. I'm gonna head over to VS Code. I've got a basic application here, just generated from the Lucky CLI, nothing special. And what I'm gonna do to install Stimulus is run the bloat gem. And I'm going to bloat with go.luckycasts.com/add-stimulus. We are not using TypeScript, so I'm going to say no there. We're going to install Stimulus 2.0, which just was released this past December in 2020. And then we are going to generate the sample controller for sure. So let's check out our diff here and see what actually has to change for you to get StimulusJS up and running. First things first, you're going to need to install StimulusJS. So that's just adding it to your package.json with version 2.0. Next up, you're going to need to modify your app.js to actually start StimulusJS. So I import a couple of things here. One is specific to Webpack. So if you're not using a Webpack-based JavaScript bundler, you'll have to include your controllers manually. However, if you are using Webpack, which out of the box, Lucky with Laravel Mix does do, then any file in your controllers directory is going to be loaded as a Stimulus controller, and you can use them in your HTML without any additional import statements. So we can see an example of one of those controllers here. The bloat gem and this Rails byte installed a hello controller, which means that you can initialize this onto an element with something like this: data controller equals hello. Stimulus is automatically going to load this as your hello controller because of the name, hello_controller. And you're going to have access to the targets, this function, and of course any HTML event that you want to hook an action into. Because this is just a basic scaffolded app, let's add some functionality to the sign up new page, since I know that's something you can get to relatively easily. We'll mount the controller to a div around this sign up element. So we'll do that with a data controller is hello. And again, this is just going to output something to the effect of div data dash controller equals hello. So I'm just using the lucky page syntax here, but it's going to output something like that. Next up, let's add a button. So we saw here that I have a greet function. So let's test that when it initializes or whenever it connects to an element, we can see this message. And then whenever we click a button, let's greet the user with a different message. So we'll have a button, and on the data action attribute, we want to say whenever you click this button, we want the hello controller to run the greet function. And let's say this is just the hello text inside the button. We'll save this. We'll let our app recompile in this other tab here that I've got running. And once it's done, we should be able to flip over and run to localhost. There we are. We'll view our new app, and we've got our hello button. And if I open up my console here, we can see the original message from the connection, which means everything is hooked up and working. StimulusJS is running. And then if we click hello, we get our second message. Now, this is obviously scratching the surface of what StimulusJS can do, and we're going to be using it in a lot of future episodes on LuckyCast to add JavaScript sprinkles to functionality, make it a little bit of a richer user experience. So we'll see a lot more of this in the future. But for now, I hope this has inspired you to give it a shot if you haven't, or to stretch the limits of what you can do now with the new Stimulus 2.0 stuff like value and class APIs, which you can read about in the documentation. And if you are a pro subscriber and you weren't able to do something in today's video, or you have some questions, scroll down on luckycast.com, click ask a question, and I'm happy to help you out. Until next time, everyone, this has been Steven with LuckyCasts. Have a great day.